son, where did you find this?
Oh, welcome back, gamers. Pour yourselves a drink or another indulgence of your choice, and let's dive into another episode of the Tryhards. Thank you so much for listening, and we're on our never-ending journey to see consistent quality return to the gaming world. It's a thankless job, but we're here to do it. Connor, you been playing anything fun lately?
Yeah, I finally got a new controller, thank God. So hop back into Ghost of Tsushima, which has been a lot of fun. Getting ready for Ghosts of Yotei, which should be another good game, honestly. And then, keeping up with WoW, getting ready for the new season on March 4th. And then just, Marvel Rivals. What about you, my man?
You know what I've been into a lot lately is Civilization 5, a little callback from, 2010?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. So I've been keeping up with the news around Civilization 7. And that's the most recent release for them, for Firaxis and all that. And man, is it unpolished. It's such a letdown because the user interface is pretty sloppy.
Really?
I mean, there's some fonts that are different. There's the spacing is different in spots that are right next to each other. It's I wanted it to be more, and which it's a bummer because these are not annual titles. These are not the games that are just being pumped out, and I can go, well, I didn't get it on this one, maybe I'll get it on the next one. You gotta understand, Civilization 6 came out in 2016.
Really? Damn, that was a while ago. I didn't realize it was that long ago. Wow.
Yeah, so they've almost had. I mean, again, I know that Civ 6 had all the DLCs and everything. Give them a couple years to get through that. You're still looking at roughly 6 to 7 years of development on Civ 7.
Yeah.
And that to come out with a product like this where people are going damn, man, it's just sloppy.
Ugh.
And even so they've changed some of the gameplay on it too with so Civ 7 now, how Civilization games have always worked, and this is a strategy game, turn-based strategy. How they've always worked is you get a nation of your own, and you're running through the ages. Now, the speed at which you do that is kind of up to you. You can go through, and you realistically can, if you're going up against an easy, AI or going against a player who maybe hasn't played before, you could roll in with tanks and be going up against barbarians, if you're speeding through shit. However, that's not however. That's the fun of it, right? You have the freedom to go through. Civ 7 changes that. Now it's every player moves through the ages at the same pace.
That's awful. What? No way.
You're just look, it looks weird. I'd have to really dive in. I was waiting to get this game, and because of all the reviews, there's this series on YouTube, and I'm gonna look up the creator right now. But he's a fantastic. It's that kind of before you buy.
Oh
type,
yeah.
And so I think he just did one for it's Game Ranks.
Yeah, that guy's good.
And so love those videos, fantastic. I always check those out for these new games now because they give a pretty good run through of these games. And Civ 7, it was pretty damning. And of course, there are some the visual bugs and stuff. I feel like we've kind of come to accept that, which is a little sad.
No,
I think about it.
Yeah.
So and again. I'm not sitting here expecting perfection every single game, but when you've got a significant amount of time invested, a significant amount of money, there's some missteps you can't exactly make, and it bums me out. And look, this is going to tie in beautifully right now because we normally do the news and stuff, but the news is too relevant to what we're talking about today, which is we're talking about the gaming industry as a whole. Where is this thing going? Are we going to see another golden age of gaming again, or are we going to see a continued fall off of key companies and titles and more of the same, which is like has bled into now, game companies are blaming players when launches don't, go exactly to plan, EA, Ubisoft, there's countless examples, and we're going to get into it. But essentially, are we safe here or are we screwed?
That is the $1 million question, man.
Maybe somewhere between.
I think we're just gonna toe the line, and maybe we'll get lucky, and other years we'll just take a bath.
And that's the thing. We're going to be seeing kind of an analysis of where we're at and where we're going. So now, for me, the number one trend that sticks out, because it's just so obvious when it happens, is unfinished games being rushed to release.
Yeah, I mean,
so there are countless examples of like, I think just based on what I said, you're going to think of any number of games, and like we're talking about Civ 7. Civ 7 was not rushed by any means, and it's still having these problems. But you get these games that are. I think we need to take a step back and really define. It's not so much about the time spent. It's more about, are you releasing a game that is unfinished?
Yes.
Because
correct.
if it's unfinished, you're rushing it. By definition, it wasn't ready to release, and you released it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That has become a trend because of games increasingly becoming online only,
mm-hmm.
and online downloads. So, Connor, when you think of a game that was rushed too early, what do you think of?
I mean, any number. I mean, we could start from probably the most recent, which is, we talked about it to some extent last week. Dragon Age of the Veilguard, definitely rushed. A lot of things missing. A lot of kind of unoptimized issues, not running correctly. The two biggest ones, realistically, when someone says unfinished game, Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh my God,
and then,
that game was what it was such so hyped up, obviously.
Correct. Yeah.
And it was supposed to be a visual like revolution in terms of just how the game, was put out and how it looked, and then it was just a complete mess. I mean, it got so much that was like half of the hype, half of the news around it was just how poorly the launch was handled.
Oh man. Unreal.
So yeah, that's a huge one. Another one I think of, this is another one we talked about, was Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed Unity.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. I mean,
that game. Was that game done? Was that game unfinished, or was it just shit?
I think it was mostly just shit. Let's be completely real with you. I think it was just poorly written and boring. But that had become sort of the MO of Ubisoft towards the end of that Assassin's Creed era, before they cut it off and revamped Origins and whatever.
Yeah, and that's fair. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, that's the most recent.
Yeah,
that was glitchy as hell.
I loaded that up recently because I was bored, and I was like, I think I kind of want to replay this game. And man, you're sitting there and you're noticing rendering issues, and you're literally like you're having like massive stutters, which is just one of those things. You're like, I don't know how I'm supposed to look past something like that when I'm like it's supposed to be in this open world setting, and it's just like micro stutters, massive stutters, So yeah.
And the problem is that still was what Nintendo's biggest launch to date initially.
Yeah.
So these game companies are not getting, like these. We have, and there's way more examples of this. Dating back to early 2000s and stuff. Games being released too quickly, but they're not feeling the effects in a lot of ways initially in terms of sales. I mean, Nintendo's got a little bit of kind of like goodwill built up here and there with their game releases, but I think the trend still is that like we can just patch it later.
Yeah, that has become the status quo, right? I mean, seen it in a number of games where it's like, and to some extent it does work. Obviously, Cyberpunk 2077 does have the, ability to look back and say, yes, we screwed up, and now we do have an honestly pretty good playable game. No Man's Sky would be another one.
See, that's a huge one, but here's the problem with that. They're hitting their stride, It's kind of like happening right now, but you could say this year and the last like year and a half, they've really gotten into it. But we're talking almost a decade since that game first came out. Most games don't get that kind of leeway. They don't have an amazing launch or sustained numbers. They're not going to be around.
Agreed.
Some games will just get dropped, especially for something that, if No Man's Sky was to just call it in 2017 and not continue, not keep going, that game would be completely unplayable.
Agreed.
But now
Yeah.
but because they were allowed to keep going and finally fixed some key things, it seems like it's finally starting to hit its stride. But again, most companies, most games, most developers, they don't have that kind of leeway.
No,
or
they just don't
to
have the
keep
patience,
things going.
Let's be honest with you. There's not a lot of probably personal pride in the product. I mean, let's go to one that you and I have gone back and forth on a lot, which would be Anthem, right? Anthem was supposed to be this next level Destiny. You do whatever you want in this cool suit, explore this world, and it was supposed to change everything.
I was so excited.
Yeah,
I was so
too.
excited for this game.
I was very interested to see how it was going to be a more I guess a more unique way to play kind of like a Destiny style game, because it was kind of following on the footsteps of the original Destiny. But I mean, that game lasted 2 years, I think. I think in 2020, it was released in 2019. In 2020, they said that they were going to completely overhaul the game, and in 2021, they just gave up. So
I'm genuinely surprised it lasted that long, because it was empty. It was boring. A lot of the because I played it, and I went through the demo first. The demo I forgave because I was like, this is an empty game on purpose right now. It's just a demo. But when the game came out and it was like, oh, nothing was improved, you're essentially playing a shell of a game. And I was just it sucked, not just because like, oh, we were expecting this great game, but like you could tell some elements were dialed in terms of like the visuals and how much like effort was put in certain areas. Because like I would love to sit here and point the blame. I feel like a lot of people point the blame at like the developers themselves, but that's not the real truth, right?
Right.
Unless they're an independent studio, they're being told what to do. So when I see BioWare, I don't see Anthem as BioWare's failure. I see that as yet another failure by EA.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to sit there with you, because it's more or less like we know that BioWare can't put out a product. They have two, unfortunately long running, but unfortunately we're better off in the beginning. I think when there was a little more freedom and less of a hit your deadlines. We need to get this out. For either we're scared of another game coming out, or we just need to, margins, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's look, these companies have control. They have the power. And when the problem with the industry, I guess we're getting into this really early, and I look, you're going to hear me say this practically every episode at this point, is that these companies are the ones in charge, and they're making decisions that are revenue-based. They're not making decisions based on creativity. So that trend is, and that's not just one. Like, again, there's a lot of things that make up the strategies that they're pulling, but there's a whole culture that was abandoned within the gaming industry. And the concept of creating a good game for the sake of creating a good game, creating something fun. And, something that you as a developer would want to play, that old chestnut, the oft-remembered business model of having a good product that people want to buy. That kind of shit is gone now, because of these companies like EA. EA is not, look, they may have started at humble roots and everything, and they used to do things right. They're one of the biggest success stories of the gaming industry, which really sucks that they've, and this is nothing new. They've done this for years, decades even, that they've, at least one decade, where they've gone so over the edge of just focusing on year-over-year growth, focusing on what titles they can just milk and, for easy money. And that gets us into, another trend of like a live service money pit. That's what everyone wants. Every single one of these big game companies want something they can continue to milk, whether it's, it's a gotcha game, MiHoYo.
Hoyoverse,
the Hoyoverse and what's it, Genshin, all that. You need, how about League of Legends under Riot, which is under Tencent, really.
Yes.
Tencent fully owns Riot Games, and owns half of Epic Games. So that's two major companies that are under the Tencent umbrella. They own stakes in a lot more. They own like what, 16% of From Software. They own I was just looking at this. They fully own Grinding Gear Games that just put out Path of Exile 2 and obviously had a lot of success with Path of Exile 1. They own a ton. And that's, you get into Nintendo as well, Microsoft Games, Ubisoft, all of these huge companies. They've all wanted to get on that, the money train when it comes to live service, right? League of Legends really, made a ton of money with skins and Hextech chests, which that we'll get into in a second because they've stopped that shit.
Yeah, they have.
Fuck it, let's do it now. Wait a minute, because they've said that was their bread and butter, right? You're spending real money or Blue Essence in this case.
Correct.
Blue Essence was if you played a shit ton of games, you're able to get a lot more chests and be able to open them. But you could spend real money and get in and get things faster. And then also skins, tons of money for them. Chromas, oh my God. The guy who decided to say in a meeting, what about different colors of the skin? Have we considered that? That guy probably got a bonus, a blowjob, and a flat screen right then and there. It's like, here you go. Just go home with all of that. Thank you, sir, for that. Because, paying for different colors of skins. But they've made so much money, and it's never enough.
And let's not forget, again, maybe going off the rails a little bit here, but League of Legends is still considered a free-to-play game. They have removed the Hextech chests, which were part of the free-to-play model, which unbelievable. I got a few of their high-end skins off of those Hextech chests, which was again, there are a lot of players who believe in not paying for certain stuff, and
And look, what I'll say about that is some of the skins that I got out of those Hextech chests, I can say as a consumer, as a player of League of Legends for years, getting those skins for free out of those Hextech chests made me want to buy more. Wanted to go out and get other skins and be like, oh shit, I got this one. This one's so cool. You know what? I'll go over and get this one. And I did spend some money getting different skins for characters where I'm like, yeah, suddenly that was more worth it to me because they were giving me something. It wasn't just taking. So I think this is a short-sighted move by Riot, which, it has no shortage of short-sighted moves in that company.
Correct.
But what it costs to make Arcane, they're probably still making, trying to recoup those losses. It's not a loss; it's success.
No, for sure. Obviously, Arcane is a really well done. You can tell a lot of thought and a lot of care goes into making that series, and it does show.
Yes, I don't want to. I do want to say I don't want to shit on that.
No, absolutely,
it's a fantastic series.
But it is kind of an if-then, because Arcane has done so well, it does cost a lot of money. I saw somewhere in the realm of $250 million to make these two seasons of Arcane.
$250 million?
Yes, an insane amount. So
for what? Okay.
I
don't want to say for what. I don't want to be that dude, and I know that costs are inflated everywhere, but
absolutely.
Holy shit. That's a full-on fucking production.
And to an extent, it is a full-on production. It's pretty impressive to see, the animation style they use. Obviously, they do have some big-name voice actors. But yeah, it is kind of one of those things where you go, okay, Arcane was really expensive, and then they're removing the free-to-play sort of reward system going towards the players. So now, obviously, they have their own battle pass. Now you have to buy skins. So does it, it's obviously there are a ton of concurrent players playing League still, and will for a while. Is basically League just now funding or paying off these sort of debts or funding these upcoming Arcane projects, which is like now the players are paying for these shows to come out that they in turn also consume. So,
I mean, unless something comes out with Riot where they say what's up with that, and they may have,
Yeah, I saw something that they doubled down and basically said that it wasn't healthy for the full life of the game, so on and so forth, which, I don't really want to dissect this sort of corporate speak from them because, it's...
But that's the thing is like I think when we talk about Riot, when we talk about these other game companies too, it is you're getting into the corporate. Like they have numbers to hit. They have year-over-year revenue and growth goals to hit. Like they're going to do that in any way, shape, or form that they can. So I don't have faith that like look, when you see a backlash like to this Hextech chess thing, like yeah, you're going to correct pretty damn quickly, but don't think for a second that they're going to back off. They are they're looking for new ways to get this done. And I think that League is one of those games that you like you said, you're going to have an established, player base for a long time. And you kind of got to ask yourself at what point, are you taking too much from that base? Are you asking too much when you've made so much money off of this game in just about every way possible? Just the skins alone, I keep coming back to it because it just blows my mind. People can pay $20 sometimes for these like premium skins, and like they are everywhere. So they're making a shitload of money. It's not about profit. They're profitable. They're very profitable. If they're not, that's fucking ridiculous, because they've truly, they've taken in so much money and they've funded. They basically look, credit to Riot because they really did amplify the pro gaming scene at the time it needed it most.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there are benefits to having a company like that has the spotlight and can put resources to things, but I think they're they branched out quick, like in the back half of the 2010s. It was kind of like League is super successful. All right, let's get an FPS going, and let's get Valorant in there. Let's get the still coming RPG, whatever it is.
Yes, yeah.
They've got a lot of toes in the water here.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot in a lot of different buckets of water.
Yeah.
And I applaud their ability to do that, but I also know that at some point you're going to run into the corporate wall of, well, we didn't grow, either at all or as much as we thought we were going to, and Tencent is not going to stand for that. They're just not going to.
Not.
That's why you see, companies like EA laying off BioWare developers. And, it was like not BioWare's fault that EA can't run a proper company, but they haven't been able to for about a decade now. So it truly is up to these companies, and the consolidation is just wild. So it's kind of right now the dial is kind of we're in the screwed part of things, because if you look at all these companies, it's not getting any easier for them to put out these games, and they're not listening yet. There's only one studio that I can consistently think of, and I know I'm not saying it's not the one good studio. There are plenty of studios out there that really rock it, but I think if you ask anyone in the business right now, and any gamer, well, which studio it really has players' interests at heart, it's going to be Larian.
Agreed. Yeah. No, I think they did everything super well. They took a long time with Baldur's Gate 3, and I think that they did something that, other companies do but don't take any sort of notes from or listen to, is they had multiple long alpha tests, beta tests. You could download the first act. You could buy and download the first act of Baldur's Gate and play it, and people played it over and over. And I think, I saw stills of what Shadowheart used to look like, what Lae'zel used to look like, and people went, nah, we don't really like that. What about this? And, there was like a real kind of like think tank between the developers and the players for what the players would want, which is ultimately who matters at the end of the day, So.
Yes. And so everyone's kind of looking to them as the new model of is this? We really hope. I feel like everyone's hoping that the Larian model will be the new standard, because Larian, they're a privately funded company, so this is a private company, and that is important because when you get into publicly traded companies, now you're looking at investors, you're looking at shareholder value being placed. Yes, you're looking at shareholder value being placed above, consumers and just their players. So when Larian is able to make all these moves and take the time to truly build a game the way that they want, the way that they've done with Divinity Original Sin and the sequel, with obviously Baldur's Gate 3, which rightfully won every award it was practically every award it was up for.
It cleaned house for good reason.
It cleaned house, and look, there are going to be people that go, I didn't like it, it's not for me. Look, if that kind of game is not for you, then it's not for you. That's fine. But for the if you really look at the quality of this game, nothing was missed. They didn't. As a player, I've not been left wanting in any phase of this game. It is truly fantastic, and they were able to put in that kind of effort because they didn't have people breathing down their necks saying you've got a release date to hit, because shareholders want to get their money, before the holiday season, whatever it is. And look, these larger game companies like EA, Sony, Nintendo, all these examples we've used, they didn't get there because of savvy cost-cutting techniques or by rushing the games, knowing that they could just release a patch later, or by blaming their customers for the failure of their games and telling them to get comfortable with the idea of not owning them, owning the games. They got here on the backs of great games. And those games were made by some incredible people that were given the time, the funding, the creative freedom to make something great. That kind of shit pays off.
Yes.
And I know it's not 100% guarantee, and that's the shit that scares those companies more than anything, is that they would, honestly, if you put a gun to their head and say, if you could take kind of above average consistency of games that make you money versus taking a swing on something truly creative, truly wonderful, they're going to go for the money every time. They'd much rather put out a product, because at this point it's all numbers to these people. They're looking at numbers on a spreadsheet. They don't give a shit about the plot of these games and the people that make them. They just care about their numbers on their goddamn screen. And look, I'm painting with a wide brush here, but that's these larger companies. They practically don't have a choice in the system that they've entered. They're public, or they're owned by someone else, and that just never leads to, the consumers getting the highest quality products. It is always, what can we do? How can we make the most money for the least effort? That's what it always comes down to. If you look at, speaking of the least effort, look at these annual titles. These games that come out a new one every single fucking year.
Yeah.
It seems like Call of Duty. Call of Duty has a new game to buy at $60 to $70 a fucking game. They've got one coming out every single year, and how much changes, really?
I can tell you so much. Seeing like COD streamers, whatever, I've watched kind of like almost YouTube compilations of just hearing like COD aficionados going, we know it's the same game. We know it's probably going to be shit on release, but we play this game, so this is just what we do. They have come to assume that they are going to get a subpar product. And that's just really sad that basically us as consumers, as gamers, are now kind of just going, well, the game's probably going to be absolute shit on release, and we're going to have to wait a month. We may have to wait a year for this to actually be playable and be fun. But whatever, this is kind of the hand that we're now dealt.
So we've got a game that comes out. It's patchy or buggy or glitchy, whatever, but they eventually patch it out, so it takes 4 or 5 months, then it runs clean, and then 6 months later a new game comes out? That's just unsustainable. You know who else does that? Again, EA, goddammit. Fucking Madden series. That Madden series is a joke now.
It is running off of a terrible engine. I mean, you can just look at the way the models run. They are not human-like. I mean, no. Some of you probably are not big football, sports enjoyers in general, that's completely fine. But just, you can watch from the sidelines and you can tell the way that some of these players move and run is not natural. It's not human-like, and it's not how these certain players would, sort of interact in the space.
Exactly. And you look at the game, you ask players they buy this game every single year. What are you getting when you buy this? They go, a glorified roster update, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the roster updates used to just be a thing. Like, it used to just be a little update you went to, just let's update to the most recent roster. And now it's like you have to buy the game practically because, look, these games don't have enough going for them every single year. Not enough is happening. They're in development.
Agreed.
To release these titles every year was just a mistake anyway. I understand the appeal. I understand you want to keep up with rosters every single year, but you could honestly, if they were doing things, for gamers, for their consumers, they could stretch out. You could have a Madden title that runs for a couple, 2 or 3 years, and just with periodic roster updates, and you just update that game, get things going. That would be a much better model, but it would cut down on those initial sales because. But EA is even trying to change that because you look at what's the most popular, or what they push you to at least in Madden is their
Team.
online play.
Yep, Ultimate Team, online play. Yep.
So you can buy the cards, you can buy to get players, and they do that they do about FIFA as well, and their in the soccer franchise. So there's clearly a shift, that's taken place over the last decade, and maybe 12, 15 years even, that has pushed things from, how can we make a good game that sells? How can we get those initial numbers to how can we milk the players that keep coming back every year? It's a more consistent base. I understand, but look, any business out there is going to tell you price increases are just part of doing business.
Sure.
And in a lot of areas that makes sense, right? You're buying something consistently. Production costs go up, labor costs go up. You pass those costs on to the customer. Maybe they see things go up. I think the industry standard, no matter where you kind of go, is usually 3 to 5% somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But things have been jumping a lot, and it's not like these labor costs are going up significantly for these larger companies to where they can't absorb it. Where they're losing is if they have to pay more in labor or in production or somewhere else, that cuts into their growth. It doesn't cut into their profit. Trust me on that. It cuts into their growth numbers. That's why they lay people off. When you see layoffs, understand that this is not about profitability. If they wanted to get profitable, they'd look in the C-suite at all of their execs and they'd cut, all salaries by 50%, and those guys wouldn't even fucking feel it. But that's not what this is about. It's about growth and looking at those growth numbers year over year, and how can we get more? And it ruins a lot of titles. So, you've got all of these trends, all of these huge companies that they just have missed they've missed it for so long.
Sure.
Looking at maybe 12 to 15 years.
So,
but it is changing. That's all the bad news because it is kind of shifting. The public is getting more powerful in these, releases, and you can tell because these same companies that have all the money and power, they're starting to swing on us, with blaming players. Look at what Star Wars Outlaws. That's suddenly the players' fault that release was shit. It couldn't be that the AI is so goddamn bad that you could be sitting there on the hardest difficulty. You're watching stormtroopers just absolutely miss you at point blank range.
Hey, canonically accurate. Let's be real.
Okay. Yeah, but this is not a main character of Star Wars. This is Star Wars Outlaws. There are so many problems with that game and so many issues that they could have fixed, that they could have addressed, and the game didn't perform well, and that's on them. It's not on the players.
Sure.
You put out a product, and look, if you open up a restaurant and everyone comes on opening night and you serve them all and they all go, look, the majority of them go, this tasted like shit. they're not persecute, or they're not like going after you. You're just a shit cook at that point.
True.
You've put out a product that no one wants, and that you're supposed to get weeded out. That's the whole, the system we're in, right? Competition breeds more innovation, which is correct. But when these companies further and further consolidate, it takes away that, the innovation, it takes away the creativity, and this is the natural result of all of that.
Sure.
This is everything that is happening right now. Is these game companies think that it's just, whoa, how could anyone have predicted this? But if you just know a little bit of history and know, how buying things works, you have to have a good product.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just roll in and go, well, this is Assassin's Creed. It's a good title, right? We've had games in the past that work.
Yeah.
No, you have to show up. What's the next one? Red? Or the game set in Japan.
Shadows? I think it's Shadows.
Shadows. There we go. It was Project Red. That's what it was when it was a code name.
Yeah.
But Assassin's Creed, Shadows. They better come correct. The game better be fun and playable from day one. Otherwise, shit's coming, and they should expect that. If you don't put out, if you're gonna tell people to spend that kind of money now, $60, $70 just to get the access to the game, you really do have to come correct. And
and not to mention at this point, this is kind of the penultimate Assassin's Creed game. People have been wanting this game for probably 10 years at least. I know that this is always the one that has always come up as like, well, I mean, it's kind of a one-for-one, right? Assassins and Shinobi. That's just kind of like a hand-in-hand, and everybody wants that because obviously us in the West kind of love the culture and like the romanticized ancient Japan, I guess. Probably the wrong term.
Sure, yeah.
But moving into... I actually want to ask you a few questions, kind of, since this is the landscape we live in, and I'm just kind of interested to see. This is just going to be more philosophical between me and you, but obviously we talked about obviously No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077. They did come out and they were shit, and memes, this and that. But because they got passion, now that they're fun games, like is that kind of an okay thing for us, or does it give that game a reprieve? Not the studio. But does it give the game a reprieve and kind of okay, us as consumers and gamers, we're okay with this one, but understand that we need this kind of more on release for your next IP, I guess.
Look, I'm going to say, like, if you come out with a game like this, if you're, as a studio, if you're saying, look, we recognize, if there's backlash, right? A game releases and there's backlash to it and it's legitimate, not just review bombing for, whatever bullshit reason, but if it's real and legitimate and people and a studio latches onto that and says, we hear you, we're going to be making changes, we're going to be, implementing things, and we're going to be listening to you, I'll give you a pass. I don't know how long that extends to, but
fair.
I think that one great example is with Helldivers. I think that Helldivers 2, really they've had their fair share of issues from changes they've made when they were putting too much focus on balancing guns and things like that, and really it kind of took away from the fun. They recognize when players are like, look, we're just not into this. We just want to blow shit up and have fun with our friends. We're not sitting here trying to have a balance for a player versus environment game. Like, we're not just sitting here, it's PvE. Come on. And with that, Arrowhead Studios, they said, look, okay, we get it. Mostly because they were losing players out their ass.
Yeah, that game hemorrhaged hard at one point.
Yes, but so that scared, Arrowhead scared Sony, and the changes were, reversed, and things were, it put them on a better path that I think that they've been able to continue. And really, that doesn't always happen. You lose a significant amount of players, they don't come back for the most part. Whereas with Helldivers, they did.
Mm-hmm. And that's something to be said about that game, right? Because it is genuinely fun, and it is in a great state right now. I mean, it's fun. Like, even if you play it once every other week, once a week, whatever, it's fun to just, you, me, one of our other friends, we kind of just get a little wacky. We kind of just sit and bullshit and just blow shit up. We all die. We laugh, But
It's fun as hell.
It's absolutely fun as hell. So then my next one, kind of a two-part question, because we've talked a lot about games getting rushed, and that's more or less the issue here, is that there's not enough time to flesh out a whole game, kind of look at these little things and create a world. And that's what most people are looking for, right? Is it a connected world, right? Do you think that the average gamer, the average consumer is patient enough to wait for, a release, say like, GTA 6 has been at like 2026. We've known about this game for 12, 15 years at some point, that we knew it was going to get another one, right? It's a huge meme. It's hilarious seeing, we got X before GTA 6 type of thing. Do you think that having a company be more transparent and kind of say, hey, like, this is where we're going to be at, and maybe they may need a little more time and push back games, which isn't the norm, but hearing that is refreshing. But do you think that makes the developers nervous to, have more...
Look, I think that you can build up a rapport with your players, that if you've given them enough wins over the years. Like if you just look at like the Grand Theft Auto series, like you're saying, Rockstar has built up enough credit in the gaming community to where they can extend some deadlines and say, hey, look, we do need to take more time on this. Mm-hmm. We know you guys you've been waiting 12 years for Grand Theft Auto 6, but I think that Grand Theft Auto 5 was just such a hit that it's like, damn, you know what? Sure, we will wait a little longer to get the right thing that we want, especially when the last time you guys put something out, it was so fucking good.
Yes.
And they've put out a lot of titles where you just go, yeah, they fucking get it, man. They understand their players' needs, and which is rare because like they are a subsidiary themselves, right? Rockstar is part of Take-Two, and Take-Two is a publicly traded company, so it really does have they should be pushing back, and it should be getting worse. But I feel like Rockstar has been able to insulate themselves a little bit more, and to your question, when you have a company that has made so many good games, you will be allowed to have a little bit more leeway. I think that another great example of that is with a company that kind of everyone is always pissed off at, with Ubisoft. Look, Assassin's Creed still has a very large audience, despite really missing the mark, like in such a fucking massive way with Unity, and to a lesser extent, Assassin's Creed 3. But they really should have lost everything at that point with Unity, yes. And then
by that point,
between
Syndicate and Unity, I think the games had really started to fall apart from where they had
Syndicate
come
was
from.
better.
Yeah, but
I'll admit.
Still, I think that one was more writing between bugs and all that stuff. But it was more writing, I think, in mine. It was a boring game to.
Yeah, if you don't like the time period or the history, you're not really gonna, it was a rebound game for sure, in Syndicate, but it did play well compared to Unity. Unity was just a massive, failure, and they, like I said, they should have lost everything at that point, yes. And they were able to rebound and had some leeway built up because, again, you were talking about Assassin's Creed 2 being what hailed as the best of the series, one of the best games of all time. Black Flag and Brotherhood, and and obviously the first Assassin's Creed. They had a lot of credit built up to where they could get away with saying, "Let's retool this. Let's not just drop this as a series, and let's see what we can do." Like, has it been the most linear, perfect situation with the newer games? No, but they've been fun. I'll take that, So yes, you can. Players will wait for that, I think, but it's situational as hell. If you're putting out something that isn't part of a series, then I think you don't. I think that leeway goes away, even among studios. I do think that maybe like a studio like Rockstar, certainly like Larian, would be able to capture, and say, that leeway because they have created so many different successful games that are just really great to play. But it's tough. Players have so many games that will take their attention at any given time. Attention spans are low. If you're looking at all across the gaming community, it's about what do we want to play today. It doesn't have to be just. It can be trendy, but at the end, I think that there's some truth. There's some purity in the gaming the gaming community, in that we just want a fun game to play.
Yeah, so actually you touching on that point is very interesting, because how many times, at least me personally, I've sat and you kind of scroll through your Steam library, if you will, and just going, this game's fun. I know it's fun, but it just doesn't scratch like the kind of itch that I want, because, you think in some ways of, this, there's this and that. Maybe I don't want to do that, and feeling kind of disenfranchised almost. So does having that time to flesh out more of a world, better characters, better combat system, possibly depending on the game, does that make it that kind of game where it can capture sort of the market of players for the big? Yeah, we just want to play this game because it is genuinely good.
I don't think that any gamers out there would really have a problem if the choices are stick with what we have, where we get these big titles hyped up, and the best thing about them is the trailer at launch. I don't care about those. I don't want to sit here. I have to sit back and wait for reviews to come out, legitimate player reviews before, and gameplay videos that I can see for myself before I invest in these games. It is a significant investment, no matter what you're putting into it. Yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and just dive in based on, so and so made it. Yeah, Rockstar absolutely. Yeah, they've got that goodwill built up, but I still want to see some stuff, because that's what the industry has done to us. We've been jaded. We've been burned so many times by companies that just want to take advantage of fans of certain franchises and fans of games. They go, this is going to be amazing. Here you go, play it. And it comes out a buggy mess. And they think, I don't know if it's C-suite execs saying they won't notice. But at this point, how can you think like that when the gaming community is going to be the first one to call you out on your bullshit? There's more shit that gets discovered in these games. I mean, just world record speedrunners that will find out how to break your game on the first day it's released. Which is awesome. People are going to find that shit, man. You can't hide that, especially today. So I don't know where we go. But I do think that the players, I think that collectively we would much rather see longer times between releases if it meant getting the game we want and the way it should be. And that I feel that is changing because of Larian. I think because of Baldur's Gate 3 being such a success in every, conceivable, it was so massive, and they clearly made a fuck ton of money on it and are still making a ton of money. That's the way you do it. You just put out a good product, and you know what? So it's going to take some time. I'd rather you take the time you need to make it right. They've already said they're working on their next RPG, and it's probably not going to be done until, they said a minimum of 2028.
Yeah.
And so to some people that was kind of like, oh, that sucks. It's far from now. But at the end of the day, it's not really that far away.
And then there's that good faith of you sitting there and going, well, I already know what they are capable of. So being able to know that this next game that comes out is going to be worth this weight that I have. And the cool part, this latest patch for Baldur's Gate, they're adding a new subclass for each special edition class at this point, which is awesome. It's going to make it completely fun new playthroughs for everybody. But the best part, dude, you teed me up so many times for this next question. The two-parter is especially now ending up talking about Larian, is that, like, do we want a more transparent developmental roadmap like Larian kind of did with, like, more open beta tests and kind of like these, like, back and forth between the players being like, here's kind of a small snippet of our product. Play the absolute shit out of it and let us know what works and what doesn't. Like
the early access model.
Yeah, exactly. Is that something that you're like? Would that be something that if more companies did that you'd be down for? Like,
absolutely. And I think the biggest fear that these companies see is, well, we don't want to let the cat out of the bag. We don't want to reveal too much about the story. We don't want to miss out on the players that that maybe have never seen this before. We want to still have hype at launch, right? And time again, companies have proven that you can still do this and not, you can still have an early access and not have to sacrifice those initial launch numbers. I mean, look at Subnautica, right? Unknown Worlds put out Subnautica for early access for years.
Yeah.
It was like a couple years, and then still they made their money back and more. They got plenty of players, going through. They're going to do the same thing with Subnautica 2, and like you mentioned with Baldur's Gate 3, that the first part, Act 1 was available and still significantly changed. You can hide all that stuff. It's fine. You're not going to lose a ton of momentum just because the game's been out there in early access for a while. I think that when I see a game in early access, I see a company that is taking things seriously.
Agreed.
You're really caring about what your players want. And that says more than anything, any trailer ever could, any hype or marketing. I don't need any of that shit. I just need to see that you're taking this seriously, because if I already have an interest in the game and I see that you're diligently working to make this the best possible, launch and experience for us as players, you have my respect.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't I want to invest and take a look at that? I mean, Subnautica is a game that I still go back to. I love playing that game so much. My oldest son, absolutely is obsessed with Subnautica, and
Great.
we're
That's
eagerly awaiting the next game. And that was in early access for a few years, and this next game will be in early access for a few years. That's not going to dampen the launch. I think that more games that have the ability to do something like that, they absolutely should. You're getting either paid early because you still have to, some early access you got to pay to get into.
Absolutely.
So you're getting some early funding, and you're also getting live, reviews that are happening in a format that you're able to adjust on the fly. You're able to take and create truly what patching, everything that patching was meant to be is accomplished in the early access model of games. And it's just such an easy layup for a company to use. I don't know why more companies haven't used it before, particularly, in these games that, like take Triple G. They're doing it right now, right? Early access for Path of Exile 2.
Right, yeah.
That's something that they learned from, it's from Path of Exile 1. You have to, some games just require a bit of an adjustment period.
Yes.
And why not get that in a way that absolves you of bugs, of glitches, of things that maybe aren't as polished? I would expect all of those things, in early access games. I'm not sitting here looking for supreme optimization in an early access. Are you kidding me? So you have that kind of goodwill, of that leeway. It's just logical. I'm not going to expect a finished product on something you're telling me openly is not finished yet. It's in the process of, being completed. That you have my, I'm not going to sit there and judge you harshly. And where if you release a full-fledged, this game has been worked on and we are now releasing it to the public for the first time, and it's a buggy mess like Cyberpunk 2077 when that was released, or Fallout 76, and shit like that. Those games, I'm like, no, you don't have the leeway for that. You had every opportunity to either delay launches, to put more time into it, whatever you needed. You chose not to because, of some arbitrary deadline. Because that's what these companies don't understand as well. It's like we're not sitting here looking at deadlines going, hey, look at this. Coming up on 2 years since you've been in development.
People
None of us fucking care.
Yeah, people aren't going to talk about that. I don't think that's that important. And part of it's obviously money, numbers, margins, deadlines.
Yes.
But then also it's hubris, right? You do have to believe that at some point there is a certain level of hubris that people are like, yeah, fuck it. They're going to buy it. They know they're going to like this game.
Well, It's also earnings calls, on quarterly. Look, EA wants a game. Why did they want the latest Dragon Age game to come out when it did? They wanted to beat the holiday season, and they wanted to boost their numbers going into their Q4 before their end of their fiscal year. That's all strategic. That's numbers, that's shareholder value. That's not thinking about the players. And now they've had a substandard launch. They're trying to make up $500 million that they had planned to get that they're not going to get now. And it's like they wouldn't have to do any of that if they would just be a little bit more transparent in the development and give their developers more freedom to, look, I don't know if you can do it like something, we were just talking early access. I don't know if you can do something like that with Dragon Age, but you can give them more time. That is always an option. It really is. And it may not seem that way to the EA execs, but those aren't the target audience. These guys don't fucking game. They're put in that position to make money and get growth year over year. It's a generic corporate style governance, and it's not going to yield you results the way that you want them, especially in a creative space like gaming.
Yeah, so that actually got me thinking, right, of how do you make a game or how do you do kind of a early access for a game like Veilguard, right? But it's, again, you can take a 30-minute snippet, maybe an hour, and just kind of throw them into a certain scenario, right? And that gives you enough. Interact with NPCs in the universe, have certain kind of choices, and then have a kind of a very small after effect of kind of what happens. That really is, I think, what most people would want. I know for me personally, I don't want to play a full game or feel like something that's like, oh, this is going to be directly what I'm looking for. But at least give me kind of a snippet that I can look at and go, nah, you guys really are fucking this up right here, and this is not great. So, let's kind of pivot and move somewhere else. So
yeah, but I do think that Larian having so much success with Baldur's Gate 3 and really pushing through financially is going to be a beacon for a lot of these companies. But the problem is does a company like EA or Tencent or Nintendo, do they look at Larian's success and think that's an anomaly? Or do they think of it as what it really is, which should be a trend? It should be, hey, let's go back to making good games again. Because again, these companies didn't get massive because of savvy business tactics and layoffs. They got there on the backs of fantastic games that will live in the hearts of players everywhere, and that's what they need to focus on. And I'm hoping that Larian's success, and luckily, or not luckily, but maybe it is a little bit of luck at this point, but I'm really thankful that Larian is full of wonderful people who are more than willing to call out the bullshit, like at the Player Awards.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Saying that, hey, look at that. If you make a good game, you make your fucking money that you want. You put out a good product, people are going to want to buy it. That's the most basic thing you could ever, think of in economics, right? You need a good product if you're going to sell anything. And so I do have hope that that's going to serve as a beacon for developers kind of all around. Even with BioWare, just in the last week and a half, is basically begging EA to be more like Larian and say, like, we need the resources, whether that resource is time, funding, just we need something to allow us to, if you want Mass Effect 5, if you want this to be the success, across the board and provide all the shareholder value that you really fucking want, because you don't give a damn about the players, but if you want all that, you can do it by focusing on the players, because if the players are hyped and they buy your game, you're going to have financial success.
Yeah.
I feel like that's real common sense right there. But apparently I'm out of my goddamn mind.
I feel you. I feel like we're both just, spin this fucking wheel constantly, just going, God, how is it this hard to make a solid game now? Because a good Mass Effect game, Mass Effect 5, if it is a good game, will upend kind of the market currently again. It will follow with that Larian model of being like, Just give people what they need. Give them the time. Let them do what they want to do. Let them put their love and passion into a game that they want to be passionate about. And we will get that product. And we in turn will go, good job, guys. We're with you. We'll keep supporting you. So,
yes, we're going to be right there. Trust the gaming community a little bit more. If you can just give us what we're looking for, we're going to reward you by buying buy the shit that we want. Look, we can clown on skins and games and chromas and all that shit, but at the end of the day, it's a transaction that's being made by a player who wants that skin, wants that chroma, whatever, and that's fine.
Yeah,
I've bought my fair share of shit.
You and me both.
Yeah, if I look at if I looked at a total balance, I might be a little sad.
You and I probably have at least a couple $1,000 accounts in just total value of shit we bought.
Yes, and that's all extra shit on these games. And you know what? In many cases, I have no regrets about spending that money because it was something that I wanted and that was valuable to me as a player. Mm-hmm. And if you just you can't get too granular. You can't focus on just what Tyler wants. That's not how it works. But you got to focus on what your players want as a whole. And I know we're talking about running a business here. I'm not blind or deaf to the fact that it takes a lot of effort, a lot of resources to keep these gaming companies alive. And a major failure of a title can really cripple you and lead to layoffs and things. But if you just focus on what, especially with these established franchises, if you just players will tell you what they want. They will review games and tell you exactly where you fucked up. There's no shortage of reviews out there. So just read a couple of them. Fish out some of the easy bullshit that's just
rage
complaining.
Bait, yeah.
Whining, get rid of the rage bait and dive into some reviews. And I guarantee you, just putting a little bit more heart and and I say that to these companies, not the developers. The developers genuinely want to make great games. That's what they're here. That's their whole job. But they need the license in all phases to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So if anything is going to change, the only thing that was ever going to make them change their mind was something with money. And Larian clowning them as a private studio that they make they're like $500 million now after Baldur's Gate 3 was such a success. They've made that kind of level to revenue. We're talking about them going up against companies like EA that make $29 billion. So it's like Sony and shit that are just absolute heavyweights and shit.
The powerhouses is the long time.
Those companies. Yeah, those companies need to take some notes, and if they do, we're going to see a lot better games and a lot smarter decisions being made around those games instead of just throwing shit at a wall and see what sticks and blaming us as players when shit doesn't work out because you didn't listen. Mm-hmm. So again, I have hope. I think we're going to land somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's going to be we're going to be totally screwed and see these companies. I think they are going to change. I think they are going to make some adjustments to how they release games, and I think that will be significant because of companies like Larian that have had such success. So I think something will happen, but I don't think that I don't think it's going to be quite where we want it. So I think a truly large company is going to have to fail. And I think the biggest one that's always up there on the chopping block is like Ubisoft.
I think Ubisoft is probably the first to go, personally. I think that they have... realistically, Shadows is probably one of those last chance, last-ditch efforts to salvage kind of anything you have.
Yeah, and we're talking about a $2.3 billion company. That's insane amounts of money. And this launch with Shadows, if it goes south on them, which I don't think it will if they've done their homework here.
I
guess it is a coin flip.
There has been a lot of back and forth, just scrolling through Instagram, kind of random articles that pop up. There has been a lot of, real and worrying things from the consumers, and then obviously, weird social fucking shit that's going on with that. So there's some level of smoke screens that goes on, but whatever. Who fucking cares?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that they've, certainly they're not just going to crumble, but they miss on a major release like this. That's going to tank them especially in the public market where people are looking just to, hey, if these reviews don't come in, kind of pristine, now things takes a turn. So you got to hit these companies just like with anything in the world. You got to hit people in their wallets, to really get any kind of change. So again, hoping that Larian's going to be that shining beacon, and really kind of get some developers into whip them into shape here. But it'll all be how follow the money, folks. That's all that ever matters to these companies. So honestly, we thank you for hanging around with us on this one. I feel like we're always going to be talking about the state of the gaming world, but with so much going on and so many amazing titles that are scheduled to come out, and that are going to have varying degrees of reviews and things, we really wanted to dive in on this shit, and I'm glad we did. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Tryhards. We thank you, and you guys have yourselves just a fantastic week.